Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Becky Rupert McMahon. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. And like all of you, I'm coming from my remote office in Westlake, Ohio, aka home. We're gathered here today to talk about Online Notary, which is a new development in the state of Ohio in the last year. There are plenty of people who are familiar with what notaries do, but somehow this concept of online notary is baffling. And so we thought, as we are all knee deep in trying to figure out how to work from home and how to keep our businesses moving forward, that we would offer a free and informational conversation today about what the heck online notary is. Our panelists today represent three very interesting and different voices, which I hope will answer all of your questions. First, we're joined by C. Alan Nichols, who I like to call my best frenemy. Alan and I go back quite a ways. When I first became the CEO of the Cleveland Bar in 2015, Alan reached out to me as the executive director of the Akron Bar Association to say, welcome to the group. It's been a love affair since, filled with lots of grief, because that's just the kind of guy he is. But he's got a really interesting background, first as a librarian who then came into the world of bar associations, and now he is the part-time executive director for an organization called Ohio Notary Services. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Becky. How are you doing today?
I'm quite good, and I'm so impressed by your ability to come up with a virtual background that makes it look like you are just outside the Akron Bar Association.
Just standing right across the street, but actually I'm on my back porch, so this is working out fine.
I love it.
Great.
Well, we're going to come back to Alan in just a second. So at this stage, I'd like to introduce Anna Welsh. Anna, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. Anna is in a department that is probably booming right now. She is a paralegal with the law firm of Walter Haverfield, where she's been for a number of years, where she is up to her eyeballs day in and day out, drafting wills and trusts and managing the probate environment, where clearly notary services are essential, and we'll talk a little more about that. But thank you for being here, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
And then we are also joined by Lisa Reid, who is joining us. Lisa is an assistant attorney general with the Ohio Attorney General's office and is our brand new online notary, who's going to give us some insights about what the process was on that in just a minute. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Great. All right. So to get things started, Alan, I would love to come to you. You and I have been talking for about 2.5 years about something called notary reform, which was coming to Ohio, which ultimately led to, among other things, the ability for online notaries to be recognized in Ohio and the creation of the Ohio Notary Services. So I was hopeful you might start us off to set the stage.
Sure, be happy to. We have had this conversation about all sorts of changes to Ohio's notary law for the last couple of years, and all of that seemed to come to fruition in early 2019, late 2018, when Governor Kasich signed what was known as Senate Bill 263. And it did several things for the notary landscape period, but one was to standardize the process, requiring education and testing for everyone who wishes to become a notary, either a traditional wet stamp notary public or an online notary public, and make the process more of an electronic process with the Secretary of State. In the past, there were paper applications flying in from all 88 counties, and so they wanted to kind of standardize that whole process. They also wanted to centralize it, getting rid of those 88 counties in essence, in terms of it used to be all the courts of common pleas were responsible for commissioning notaries in the state, and they wanted to make that one central point, and that's the Secretary of State's office, who is now responsible for all of the commissions, both online and traditional, as well as discipline that needs to may need to happen with notaries. And so that standardization and centralization was big, but the other aspect of that was the creation of Online Notaries Public. And Online Notary is something that has begun several years ago in the state of Virginia, I believe was the first, but it's the ability to handle notarizations in a remote fashion so that the people who need to sign the document are in one location and the notary is in another location. And so that's the concept of it, using some wonderful aspects of technology. So in order to become an online notary, you must apply to the Secretary of State. You must also be a traditional notary public or in the process of becoming one. You can do this simultaneously. So you have to get your traditional notary commission, and then you're able to add on what the Secretary of State is calling your authorization to become an online notary public. You, as part of that application process for the online notary issue, you must identify the technology that you're using. And I'll talk real briefly about some of the technology features that the vendor needs to have. And there are several vendors out there in the market, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. You have to undergo education and testing. You have to take a 2-hour exam. Excuse me, said that wrong. A 2-hour class. It's online, and unfortunately, I'm in all 2 hours of it. And so for those, for Anna and Lisa, I apologize for boring you for that 2 hours probably. But that process needs to happen. And then you have to take a 30-question test, and you must get an 80% on that test. Now, both the educational video and all of the questions that are used on the test, and we've got multiple questions that float in and out, were approved by the Secretary of State's office. So that was one of the requirements, that they had the ability to sign off. And actually, when our first effort at producing the video, they asked us to do it again because there were some features that they wanted added, and one of those was to have a conversation with one of the software vendors to explain how things work. And so that's part of that video process that you'll see. Attorneys, I have that listed there because the requirements are a little different for attorneys. You know, in a traditional wet stamp notary, the attorney now has to have the education, and then they have a lifetime commission as long as they have a valid license to practice law in the state of Ohio. With the online notary, an attorney has to take the course and the test. There is no special exemption as they have in the traditional world, but they also, they will have an expiration date. And so they'll have a 5-year authorization once they pass and complete their application with the Secretary of State. So that's a little different. And actually, we've had several questions about that over the last couple of weeks from attorneys who didn't realize they didn't need to take the test, and they're like, why am I having to do this? So we've worked that out. So 5-year expiration for your commission when it comes time to renew, and then you have to take a 1-hour renewal video course. There is no test to renew, but you'll need to take that 1-hour session. There are some fees, and I say ugh because there's fees with everything. $20 with your application to the Secretary of State. Under statute and the rules from the Secretary of State, they've set the fees. That's $250 for the education and test, and $160 for your renewal. And so that is paid when you go in to take and sign up to register for the course. There are some critical aspects, and I mentioned the technology piece early. There are some features. You need to maintain an electronic journal, and all of the main vendors out there do this for you, but that is something you don't have to keep a paper journal if you're a traditional notary. We strongly recommend that, but you must maintain an electronic journal, and you must focus on the identity proofing. And the identity proofing, there are a couple of ways, you know, as a notary, and you're going to be signing this and you're not standing in front of the person who's going to be signing these documents, you want to make sure in particular who it is that you're dealing with. So there are a couple of ways. The person has to submit their identification, a graphic image. You know, they'll take a picture on the film, on the camera as the webcam that you're working with. They'll verify that particular ID. Then they'll ask you some personal questions that you would need to know. For instance, I'm asked, you know, what was the first car that I had in my name? And it would list a bunch of cars, and it would, you know, or it would tell me which of these cars have you never owned. And so those types of authentication questions are very important to the notary process, and to make sure that it satisfies the need of the notary public to make sure that you're who you are before you begin to sign those documents. You are able to charge up to $25 for an online notarization. And so that is different than the $5 fee maximum that is permitted under the traditional notary rules. Now, to do all of this, the Secretary of State selected one entity to be, as the law required, but one entity to be the education and testing provider, and that's Ohio Notary Services, LLC. And that is a really unique partnership between the Akron, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, and Ohio State Bar Associations. In some form or fashion, most of us had been involved in the notary commissioning process under the old law. And so we kind of banded together and created this business to help our members and to help us be able to help make sure that the notary process is running as smoothly as we believe that it can in Ohio. So it's a new small business. It's based at the Akron Bar Association. We've got 5 employees, which is kind of cool. We're excited about that. We are the only entity at which you can get your traditional notary and the online notary authorization, education, and testing. The website you'll see there is becomeanohionotary.com. It's pretty simple. We were offering in-person classes for the traditional notary, and we'll hope to do that again once we're able to go back out in public. But all of our education and testing is available online 24/7 via that website, and you can also order your supplies from us as well. So we've been excited about the process. We've been excited about the number of folks. We had 301 people during the month of March go through the process to become an online notary, and we're thrilled about that. Especially now, we felt for a long time that this was the trend, and we didn't think the trend was going to be here quite this soon. But obviously, the need and demand for online remote notaries is really evident in the world that we're in right now. So that's a very quick overview. Becky?
Great. Nice job, Alan. Thank you for giving us the intro. So now let's talk to 2 real live, you should get crowns with this, real live online notaries. And Anna, maybe I'll start with you. I think it's pretty easy. I'm a lawyer. I went to law school. When I came out of law school, I had the ability to file my lifetime certification. So you're somebody who did not go to law school. You certainly swim around lawyers. Can you talk to us a little bit about how long you've been a notary, and then what motivated you to move into the online space?
Well, I've been a notary for just under 10 years. And I became a notary because a lot of what I do, I need to, the documents that we prepare need notarization. So it just made sense that I would be able to notarize them. So I went ahead and became a notary. And then in the past couple of weeks, the chair of our tax and wealth management department, Lacey O'Dare, approached me and said, hey, so why don't you go ahead and become an online notary? So I took the class and the test and got everything up and going, and here I am, now an online notary.
So, and Lisa, you're obviously in a different context at the Attorney General's office. You're like me, you've been practicing law for a number of years. It seems obvious why Anna would be interested in the notary side. Can you help me talk about what your motivation was to become an online notary?
My motivation was directly sparked by our front office during COVID-19. We saw a need not only to have documents notarized by attorneys within our office, but also the various sections. For example, consumer protection is getting affidavits from consumers, and that's been sort of heightened during this time period. Likewise, one of our clients is the Department of Commerce, so we have investigators who need to notarize affidavits as well. So we have a large need.
So how did you find the process of studying to take the test, both of you? And maybe I'll stay with you, Lisa. You heard Alan mention there are a handful of lawyers who figured they probably could wing it and just pass the test. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
I would recommend that during the first piece where Alan is lecturing that the applicants take a couple of notes at that point. The second piece, interviewing the gentleman about the software, is less important but still helpful, but definitely pay close attention during Alan's solo portion.
Whenever Alan is lecturing me, I always make sure to take notes. So very good advice, Lisa.
Don't believe her.
Yeah, how about you, Anna? How was your experience with the class?
The class was very informative, and I did take copious notes, and I also rewound a couple of times to make sure I got everything, and it was very informative, and it helped me pass the test. So.
That's great. Have you actually have you conducted any initial online notarizations? Can you talk us through the process and the platform that you're using to help make that happen?
Sure. We are using, well, I'm using Doc Verify, which, I sort of just went online and tried to find out what would be best for our purposes. And we use Doc Verify, and it's fairly user friendly, and you just have the person send you the document in PDF, you upload it, and then they go through the credential analysis and ID verification. And then once the document is uploaded, there's fields that you can place into the document where the signature will go and dates, and you just fill that out, and they for the document, and you begin recording. It asks you to have them state their name, and you just go through the document, sign it, and then once you're done signing, it shuts the webcam off and you're done. So it's pretty easy. It's not difficult.
We like easy. Easy's good.
Yeah, and it's user friendly.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, I think you mentioned to me when we were getting ready for this conversation that you and the Attorney General's office, you're just getting started with this, right?
Correct. And I would ask Alan to comment. Is the organization that he created, are you looking at licensing some software on your own? I know we might have received an email about that.
We've had conversations with a couple of different companies. There's a lot of reluctance to do that, but we are trying very hard to be able to get some software that we can kind of help our members, our customers use, because I know that there's been some issues. Our companies are just slammed from across the country with online notaries and trying to pick up customers. So we're trying to see what we can do. We have not made any headway. I have a company that has told me that they'll be ready and they would love to work with us, but it won't be till June because they're still in beta testing for that product. And so that's because they're doing a lot of stuff right now with the mortgage industry. And so that's not their first priority, but the hope is I can get something before that. But right now, Lisa, I don't have anything. I know Anna said Doc Verify. That's one that we hear a lot about. And so that was good to hear from her point of view that that's one that seems to work well, but I don't have anything else other than that. But I was going to ask Anna, were you comfortable with the ID process that as you're going through that you're comfortable, knowing that the person is who they say they are across the screen from you?
Yes. And
okay.
I am. Mm-hmm.
One point we should probably make is that after the driver's license or passport is scanned, when those identity questions are asked, those are only visible to the affiant. They are not visible to the notary, correct?
Yeah. And we can't see.
So it's confidential on their end, and that's independently verified by the software itself, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then, Alan, the pricing models vary. It can be you sort of buy a supply of credits, at least on Doc Verify, but it can be as high as $25 per notarization. Am I right about that? The software?
Yeah, Lisa, I don't know. I haven't looked at the pricing on the software.
Yeah, they have quite a few different packages, so that needs to be analyzed. We're trying to get a sense in our office of how many notarizations we would need per month before we make the purchase.
Sure, and especially since the maximum that you wouldn't necessarily be charging because you're a state agency, or maybe you would, but a general notary would not be able, $25 is the maximum they could charge. And if they're having to pay $25 out to their vendor, that does not work. That's not a sustainable model.
Exactly. Anna, which pricing model did you choose, if you can share that with us?
We did, I think it was, I can't recall the name of it, but it was the highest, it was allows you to do the most. And I think it was 480 for the year.
Okay.
So, you know, and if I'm doing them all the time, so it sort of makes sense, but you do have to go in and buy ID credits, which, you know, I'm not 100% sure. I think you get 10 of them for like $25. So
it kind of requires you make a determination. Maybe Alan could speak to this. If you know the affiant, then you're not using the software that verifies their identity.
Right.
But if you don't know them, then it's a little more expensive. Is that right, Alan?
That would be I've heard that, and that's my understanding. If you do, just as in traditional notary land, if you know from personal knowledge the person who is coming in to ask for notarization, you don't have to ask, you put in your journal personal knowledge, you don't have to go through the identity proofing piece. So that would save money in that case.
Yeah, so we're trying to assess how many times we'd be notarizing the affidavit of a coworker vis-a-vis someone from the outside. Alan, maybe you could talk a little bit about the log and after the 5 years, what happens to the log? Then does it go back to the Secretary of State?
Sure. A couple things. First, I had another question earlier today, and before I forget it, I want to make sure I cover it. Once you've become an online notary, you don't have to do all of your notarizations online. If the person comes to you and you're able, in this world, social distance or whatever, you can be the traditional notary or the online notary. So that's entirely up to you. The electronic journal, once your term is expired, that journal has to be archived, and it can be archived. It's yours as an electronic notary. It's not your employer. If you're doing this for employer, it is yours, and it is your responsibility. And so typically, what I understand is that the vendors will archive for you, but there is an archival fee. And so that's one of the things that need to be done. And the information on how it's archived needs to be submitted to the Secretary of State, because it has to be kept for 10 years. And so those are some important pieces to keep in mind when it comes to the electronic journal. And when it's submitted, the information is submitted to the Secretary of State, they have to be told how they can access that in case there's an issue that needs to be reviewed. So any encrypting notes or keys or whatever, that information is provided to the Secretary. So that is important. So
the Secretary does not store your log itself. They store a link to the Doc Verify who keeps your log, correct?
They'll keep information on how to find it and access it, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'd love to take us, we've gotten a couple of questions submitted online. The first I know the answer to, but Alan, I'll tee it up to you to respond to. The question is, so we all know that lawyers have to take continuing legal education. So have our friends at the Ohio Supreme Court approved any of the online notary courses, whether it's for traditional or the online notary? Can we get CLE credit, Alan?
I got an email just yesterday from the Supreme Court approving the traditional notary education for CLE credit, not the online notary. So I won't be able to do that for online, but I will be able to, once I figure out what, now we got to go back and get everyone from January 1st on, but for the traditional notary, yes, CLE.
That's great. That's a great development. All right, so here's another question. So obviously, this is from a member of the audience. Notaries have to have a webcam and a decent computer in order to work with the software. But just how sophisticated does the client or a user need to be? Beyond a webcam, is there any special technology? Will a desktop or a laptop work, or can the interaction be done with a phone or camera?
I'll answer that question because I've actually run into this problem. I don't believe that there's any software that allows it to be done with a phone. You have to have a webcam, which can be a desktop or a laptop. And it's pretty easy, I think, from the other person's perspective. They get an email, they click on a link, and it takes them to where they need to go, and it gives them directions. So I don't know that they need to be technologically sophisticated in order to do it. They just need to have the webcam available on their computer.
Well, I confess, I don't know. I'm sure what they're saying is, in this day and age, our proverbial smartphones have cameras on them and you can do everything from Zoom to otherwise. But at least at this stage of the game, not sure how that would work on a phone.
No.
Yeah.
There's one vendor, but it's not operating in Ohio that I know of that does have mobile, but they're not operating in Ohio yet. And I even offered them office space this past weekend to get them here so that we could use them. But so
no much luck. Well, maybe they'll see this and they'll be persuaded that Ohio is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention is that technology, and you see this in the training, is based on technology for mortgage documents or closing. So that's the mindset that the technology is coming from. And I think Alan makes that very clear during the training.
So I've got another question that's come in that's related to the requirement to get a BCI report. Can one of you talk about, Lisa or Anna, talk about the process that you went through?
How about I'm going to interrupt first.
Go ahead.
You don't need it if you are a traditional notary and you are attempting to add on the authorization to be an online notary public, you do not need a BCI background check. You only need the BCI background check when you are attempting to apply for your initial traditional notary application or you are renewing your traditional notary commission. And so, and as an aside, most of those BCI places right now are closed because of the stay-at-home order. So this isn't helpful to folks who are wanting to become the first-time traditional notary. But the Secretary's office was in communication with us today. They have amended temporarily the BCI requirement for people who are renewing their commission. So it's only those who are renewing their traditional notary commission. You can submit your application with your education certificate and a statement, a signed statement that says something to the effect of, because of the coronavirus and the stay-at-home order, I'm not able to obtain a BCI background check. But once this order is lifted, I will submit that background check by December 31st, 2020, or risk losing my license to be a notary. So something to that effect, and it's on the Secretary's website, and as well as it's on our website at becomeanohionotary.com as well, the language. So that it's kind of, the idea is to not make anyone lose their notary commission during this stay-at-home time. And so that they will accept that in lieu of the BCI background check.
Okay, so I just learned something new. So I didn't realize it. I thought that it was not just first-time applicants for traditional. I also thought it was first-time applicants for online notary that would have to get a BCI. So that's great news. That's great news. And also great news for the workaround during this incredibly difficult time that we're all working through. So it makes an awful lot of sense. So let's talk. So I got another question about the difference in lengths of commission. How frequently does a traditional notary commission need to be renewed for a non-lawyer? And what about for an online notary?
It's 5 years. Commissions are 5 years in length, and your online notary authorization will expire at the same time as your traditional notary commission. So if you're not an attorney, they both happen at the same time. If you are an attorney, it's 5 years.
All right. So Lisa, have you thought about sharing this beyond just you inside the Attorney General's office? Are there others that are clamoring to think about doing this?
Well, just today I received a call from colleagues I haven't spoken to in 20 years because apparently the Secretary of State posts a list of those who are licensed. The last point I want to make, and I did want to ask Alan about it, when you're registering with the Secretary of State, there's a spot to upload 2 documents, but the certificate that we receive from your company gets uploaded in both spots. Am I right about that?
I think that you only need to upload, possibly. You only need to upload 1 certificate for the online notary, but they may have 2 slots there just because that's what they do for the traditional. So you probably would need to do that twice.
Yeah, that was just a little bit confusing, and I just wanted to avoid people having to go back and call you about that. So.
Okay.
Well, Lisa, let me apologize in advance because not only are you listed by the Secretary of State's office, but once this video starts to spread like wildfire, your friends will be reaching out to say, I saw you, I saw you. It'll also be your new party trick. Every time you go to a cocktail party, we'll be looking. Notary in the house. Forget the doctor. I need a notary in the house. Anna, what about you? Are there other areas within Walter Haverfield where others are seeking online notary status, or do you think that it's really going to be focused in your group where you're doing wills and trusts and probate work?
No, I think it across the board, everyone is looking for online notaries right now, and all the sections need it. So the business section, the even litigation, they're all, it's everyone needs it at this time. So I assume there will be other people in my firm getting their authorization soon.
Now, Alan, could you talk a little bit about the staff before we wrap up here? We've got just a couple minutes left. So if people have questions and they want to reach out to get more information beyond today's program, where could they go and who could they contact?
Sure. A couple of ways you can reach out to us. The first is simply visit our website. We've got a lot of Q&A that should be available to you there. But if you need to speak to someone in person, feel free to call us at 330-436-0118 or use the email info at becomeanohionotary.com. And so those are the ways to reach us. I want to add one last thing as well. We created an online notary referral service in the last couple of days because of a tremendous demand across the state and rural areas in particular, and need dealing with estate planning in particular and property transfers we've heard about. So if you if you are in need of a notary, an online notary public, don't have access to one, please email us at info@becomeanohionotary.com. We solicited names from everyone who's passed our test and become a commission or an authorized notary. And so we're just going through the list one at a time and making sure everyone gets the opportunity to get a customer. But we're trying to help out that way and make that as smooth as we can to just kind of help things keep moving along.
Terrific. And again, just as a reminder, you said your phone number and you said your email, but I'm going to give the website one more time, which is www.becomeanohionotary.com.
Correct.
Well, listen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I want to say a particular thank you to Lisa and to Anna for coming together quite as quickly as you did. It's amazing how, since all of us are taken out of our usual environments, that there seems to be a little more flexibility. But I want you to know how much I appreciate the fact that the Attorney General's office and Walter Haverfield gave you both the opportunity to come participate in our conversation today. I would also put a plug out on two more things, one of which is we know these are really difficult, tumultuous times, and lots of businesses have been disrupted. I just want to offer my thanks for all of you who are making the choice as you think about your notary services to think locally. We know that not on the online side, but in the traditional notary arena, there's opportunity to consider other players, including some out-of-staters, and we would very much appreciate the continued support of the Ohio Notary Services, which represents 6 bar associations across this great state. And there's no better time to help keeping your local bar moving forward than right now. And then finally, I would wrap things up, and eventually we'll be able to cut this part out of the conversation. But I hope everyone continues to follow and to listen to the orders to stay home and to take the news that's out there on the street seriously, because there is nothing more important than taking care of your own health and that of your family's health. So Lisa, Anna, Alan, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with us today. Be safe. And when we can get together again, we hope you'll all come meet us at the bar. Thank you and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.